There we go. The recording has started. Um, I just put that up on the screen. I'm trying to come up with new ideas for like a business card for us, and I played around with that one yesterday. So thought that was kind of fun. Wanted to, let me bring this down so everybody sees just what I have here. Wanted to discuss a few things this morning. One was, I think you guys may have seen the article that I posted, Cybersecurity as a Career Choice. What are the pros and cons? What are the benefits or challenges of doing that? And then we'll talk about that unintentional risk, which is something that I shared my own version of unintentional risk because I did it. That thing about cookies, that little logon warning cookie banner on my browser was very interesting. I don't know if you guys ever read those, but it points out a valuable point there that I think we should cover. And then the discussion about protecting our infrastructures. How do we harden our infrastructures so that we aren't victim to, well, in this case, it was a number of folks in a number of states, most notably, I think, Washington and North Carolina, started shooting up transformers. How do you handle that? And what if next time they're tossing poison into your water supply or something like that, Anyway, and then we'll get to anything else if we have time. So first of all, cybersecurity as a career choice. What do you all think about that? What are the advantages of the cybersecurity career field right now, and what are the challenges in getting there? Any thoughts?
Hey, Scotty, I'll start.
Okay.
I think the advantages is I find it to be very interesting and challenging career. Challenging, not a bad challenge, a good challenge, more of a fun challenge. And I find there's abundance in the career field. There's a lot of ask for it and a lot of need with the different businesses.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is the whole chicken and egg issue of, hey, I want this entry-level job. I need experience. But the entry-level job's asking for 3 years experience or 5 years experience.
Mm-hmm.
And wait a minute, I need the experience to get the set experience. And we just go around and around and around.
Right.
And getting that first step in the door.
Mm-hmm.
I find a way around that challenge is because I'm already in an IT specialist role, to just listen in your meetings and take notes, and you find that you have more experience in security than you like to think.
Right. Right. A lot of us think that unless you're, out there in the trenches slugging it out with the bad guys, you are not performing any cybersecurity role. But that's just not the case. Very good, Chris. Thank you. Anybody else? Benefits and challenges.
Well, I think the big benefit is what you're doing. You're stopping bad guys, potential terrorists, criminals, even a mixture of the two. And so that's really the big benefit out of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's sort of hard to teach that to other people because, I'll use a weird analogy. What about the NFL? Back in the day, back in the 70s or 80s or whatever, people used to become a member. They were hired by a football team, professional football, and frequently they could spend their entire career with one football club. And so you built up this legacy of, this team was great last year. They're going to be even better this year. All of the owners are mixing and matching, trying to optimize their teams. But with the advent of free agency, what occurred is people go where the money is. People go where they are offered the money, that sort of thing. So somebody who's wearing a blue jersey this year could be wearing a yellow jersey next year, and it goes down to the individual personalities instead of the team persona. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, you are what Ron, you talked about it. The overarching reason why I enjoy doing this is that it does some good. It helps to make sure that we can, wake up in the morning and our bank accounts haven't been drained. We can have the confidence to do secure transactions and expect that in most cases, those transactions are not going to end up being copied by somebody else who's going to come right after us and buy a Lincoln. So yeah, the point is, when I do the work that I do, I feel safer at night. When I try and help people learn how to be entry-level cybersecurity operators, the important thing for me is that you understand why you're doing it. Not just the technical stuff. Ooh, get to play with new toys. Yes, that's there. But the bad guys are playing with new toys too. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish the two. The major difference in the cybersecurity career field between the white hats and everybody else is the white hats are there to make the world a better place, and not just to the highest bidder. They're doing it because they have an ethical, I call it the ethical foundation for wanting to do this in the first place. Why do I get up first thing on Saturday mornings and put together something, for a discussion? Why do I keep posting on Facebook? I don't do it to be hurt, so that I hear myself talking and go, oh, you did good there. No, I do it because I hope to encourage other people so that they can look at it and say, if Scotty can do it, and it's not even his primary role, if Scotty can do it, sure, I can do it too. So I'm here to encourage, not necessarily to tell you what's best for you to do. The cybersecurity career field remains extremely lucrative. It is, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it is expected to grow faster than the U.S. labor market for at least the next 7 years in a row. There was a couple things that I saw recently where they actually used, what's it called, CyberSeek, Chris? Yeah, CyberSeek. And they looked at it and they said, it's only going to be growing. It's only going to be going up. All those people that say AI is going to take our jobs, they are sort of looking at that. It starts off being a headline, and then later on it says, well, not exactly. AI writes malware now with that chat GPT thing. AI writes malware, but not the best malware. So as a career choice, we are still in a growing career field that has a lot of vacancies. It is lucrative to get into, but there's a lot of hard work expected. You definitely need to get in and then start to specialize. Find something, one area of cybersecurity and make that your focus instead of just going in and saying I'm a generalist. Generalist gets you in the door, but then they're going to need specialists. Somebody who can handle Splunk, somebody who can handle Tenable, somebody who can handle border enclaves, enclave border protection, and those sorts of things. Somebody who can audit, somebody who can do incident response. And, you will find your niche once you get in. Sometimes it's what you want to do. Sometimes it's what they need you to do. But it's still a great career choice these days. Chris, anything to add to that?
Nope, you hit the nail on the head, Scotty.
Yeah. Frequently, you don't always get the job that you exactly wanted. I'll speak for myself. My very first job was at a Farrell's ice cream parlor restaurant down in Montclair, California. And, you see all the waiters and waitresses running around having a grand old time talking to the customers and stuff. And you say, wow, that looks like fun. I'd like to work here. And they say, okay, well, we're going to hire you to clean the tables. What? Well, that's all you're skilled for at the moment. But then after that, I did time as a waiter, and after that, I did time in the kitchen, and parlayed that into 20 years of part-time work cooking for restaurants. Wherever I went, I would cook in a restaurant for a little extra spending cash. But I started cleaning tables. You may have to think about it that way. In the cybersecurity career field, you'll get there. Just keep working toward it and accept the low-level stuff as being an entry into where you really want to go. Yep, good one.
Scotty, can I have one more thing?
Yep.
Nothing says if you are doing something you don't feel like doing, i.e. cleaning tables or working your way up the system, learn it. During your off periods, it's time to learn the new skills along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and be aware that if your employer needs if they need somebody who is trained in a particular tool, let's say a particular tool like Tenable, if they need somebody who is trained in that, they can either hire somebody off the street that has those skills. That could be difficult. Or they can train somebody from within, and then you become a practitioner, but you have also upped your skills because your employer needed them. Additionally, once they do that, they're going to look around and say, who do I upgrade? Who do I train? Who do I pay the money to train? And you look for somebody who's going to be durable. I'm going to be here next year. You look for somebody who is trustworthy, who is not just going to take this stuff and run out the door and grab the next train to fortune and fame. You look at all of that as an employer and say, who can I rely on? And you want to be known as somebody they can rely on. If they can't hire somebody off the street, they're going to have to train somebody from within. Be that person who's always there, always enthusiastic, always wanting to reach a little higher. That's what they'll look for. And that's what it will give you great career progression, and it will give them assurance that they hired the right person. Yep, good stuff. Good discussion. So how about this unintentional risk thing? Did you guys read that thing for the FAA? It was a contractor who unintentionally deleted files. And so the first thing you said, you may say to yourself is, well, that's kind of silly. But it happens. And I gave you that example of mine where I was just running too fast. And I can say it on this forum. I was using Timbuktu. Was the old remote access software used around the year 2000, 2001, 2002, thereabouts. And our servers were at one end of the Pentagon, and our office was at the other end. And by the way, I don't know if any of you have ever taken a tour or anything. They say that you can get from anywhere in the Pentagon to anywhere in the Pentagon walking in 7 minutes or less. So just so you know, I did it in a lot less than that because I was sprinting through the hallways of the Pentagon trying to get into the data center where the server was so I could push the power button to turn it back on. But unintentional risk is a big thing. You need to consider that you don't just have somebody who's kind of haphazard, zipping along doing stuff. People will frequently make small mistakes before they make big mistakes. So keep an eye out for that, and also that means to keep an eye out on yourself to make sure that you are applying the precision expected before you start clicking stuff. It may be something very simple for you to do at home, but when you're at work and maybe thousands or tens of thousands of people are relying on you, it sort of changes. You have to be sure that what you're doing is going to work. Don't just try things. And make sure that you are always doing the right things before you click that, OK button. Anybody else know of any instances of unintentional risk? Somebody who mistakenly did something? Pouring coffee on your laptop? Oh, you guys saw the Adobe commercial where the guy walks away for a phone call and his toddler gets over to the keyboard and starts doing this on the keyboard because that's what daddy does,
Scotty,
that sort of stuff happens. Yeah, Chris.
I can talk about this one. I've had instances where my cat can walk across the keyboard, and it's like the toddler tapping on the keyboard.
Yep. I've encountered that literally in my office because we use our laundry space as my office so that I can close the door and stay away from all the other stuff going on in the house. But yeah, the cat goes out there and looks out the window and comes walking back, and cat doesn't know a QWERTY keyboard from anything else, and they just step right across. And they are not literary masterpieces.
They're good with regular expressions, though.
Yep. Hey, cat, what's my new password? So, yeah, unintentional risk, it's a fun thing to consider, but the importance is to realize if you are, for example, running your risk management program for your organization, you may have to think outside the box and say, what happens if? What are the chances of? If this does occur, what is the damage that could be done? I will tell you, and I've shared this numerous times, I ran the risk management plan for the Secretary of Defense for, the first 4 years that I was there. And I never, and I don't think anybody else in the building ever had a consideration for this. Well, you put in the risk management plan, what do we do if somebody flies an airplane into our office building? It just wasn't on anybody's radar. Somebody may have speculated, yeah, this is a building, which means that somebody could, walk up to the front door and explode something, or in this case, fly an airplane into it. Sure, that's a distinct possibility, but it's so low on the probability scale that you may not even consider it. But guess what? It happened.
Hey, Scotty, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Critical industry like aircraft. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to phrase my question so that it's an easy discussion to have, but it's kind of a hard discussion to have. Okay. How can you find all risk is probably the way I would phrase it. And the reason why I'm asking is I'm sure that technician had no clue what was going on in the background if that automation process would delete that file. He was just going through his checklist, his algorithm. And I'm reading the end of the FAA article saying, well, hey, we now have a practice for if there was a cyber attack, because it looks awfully like a cyber attack. I'm paraphrasing what the article said.
Right.
How do you prepare for things that you don't foresee in the future, when the expectation is it should never go down? You have that 99.9999% uptime situation. I'm more concerned that we have a high expectation, which is good to have a high expectation, but how much does that burn out and stress out the technician in the end? That's where I'm going with those questions. My questions.
Sure. Very, very good question. I think it's advantageous that we have a knowledge manager on our call at the moment. I would suggest that, number one, you first have somebody who can encapsulate your risk. In other words, somebody who will look at risk academically, sitting in an office with a cold drink right next to them, just relaxing, but who can then speculate what if, and try and put that into paragraph form. The other thing that is helpful, in my opinion, is to define all the things that you are expected to do on a routine basis and contingencies as you understand them, and identify them all and have them in a written form, in this case knowledge articles or standard operating procedures that say this is how you do this and this and this. And so you start training people on what they are expected to do. You show them written instructions for contingencies, and that way they don't have to use the colloquial phrase, wing it. Nobody should ever, and Parima, I'm sure you remember me saying this, nobody should ever be expected to wing it. Everyone should have procedures and processes and approvals all in place that they have practiced and know about, so that if something comes in that is off color, it doesn't seem right, it's an anomaly, they can say, oop, something's up. So I would say document what you do and document as much as you can about what you are expected to do, you or your team, in advance, and have it like we had in the form of a knowledge base. That's a good place to start. Go ahead.
Speculator, but I have to be careful not to dedicate too much time to the what if this happens and we expect it to never happen.
Right.
The contingency plan, basically. And I will remind people that, well, what if this doesn't work? I need to know who my team has to escalate this to. You might never see this, but I need someone to say, I'll take this if you followed these steps and it failed. And digging that hole is sometimes difficult.
Sure. I mean, that's my suggestion, Chris. Like Parima said, you can go too far with it. But again, I'll give an example. If any of you have ever been the subject of an Inspector General audit, I have numerous times. The audit is basically an operational audit is, what do your instructions say you're supposed to do? Do you do that? That is literally the beginning of an operational audit. And that means, number one, do you have it in writing, and is it correct? And number two, do you train people, maybe not in exactly what to do all the time, but where to find what to do? Where to find it. And that's why, again, I go back to the knowledge base, especially for people who are just getting started. It's extremely valuable for you to be able to say, if this situation occurs, how do we handle it? And it's not the same for each company or each organization you go to. So The knowledge base is kind of the central stabilizing pillar, if you will, for what I consider to be a worthwhile cybersecurity presence.
I've really been digging at people lately that if we have a written process and you're learning it because you're new, and someone tells you, don't follow this, skip step number 3. I need to know that they're telling you that so that I can dig into why. Because there might be a valid reason in your location, but it really should be documented that in this location you're not going to do this because you're just not following the process now.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, I will give a real quick, it's not exactly cybersecurity, but I'll give a real quick description here. I was responsible for the Freedom of Information Act queries at the Secretary of Defense for a couple of years. Everything that came in for FOIA requests at Donald Rumsfeld's office, I was responsible for, the people that would do the work, get the responses, and send it back out to the requester. The interesting thing about it was I had gotten to the point where I was starting to do other things, and they were bringing in new people, and they said, okay, so how do I do this? Not only did I not have time to do it, I didn't have time to train people on how to do it. So I ended up nights and weekends going into the Pentagon and sitting with the guy who was the specialist in charge, and we wrote line by line by line the procedures that he was doing, and I would write, oh, I'm clicking on this. Okay, did you do this? Yes. Type it all up, type it all up, type it all up. And we developed a 53-page SOP on how to handle FOIA requests for the front office of the Secretary of Defense. One SOP, 53 pages long. But it was a masterpiece because it took into account everything from, uh-oh, we just got this, to here you go, we're all done. And, the important thing to remember is you write that stuff down early, not just when you're headed out the door or whatever, because then you don't have time to quality check it. You watch for situations and then begin to document them. Maybe not for me, because, man, I may know it in my head, but what about the next guy? What about the next guy? Okay. So, protecting our infrastructures. I bring this up because, again, I was with the President's Commission on Critical Infrastructure Protection, and they had kind of a over-the-horizon viewpoint. They wanted to think about stuff before it became an issue. And they talked about critical infrastructures, which now, you guys remember, we shared about this last year. Do you know what they're changing critical infrastructures now to?
No idea.
I think it's called Significantly Important Entities, SIE, or Strategically Important Entities. So when you hear critical infrastructures, they're sort of talking about, back in the day, I think they had 12 critical infrastructures that they defined, roads and rails, communication, emergency services, water and power, etc., and banking. They were all considered critical infrastructures. But if you remember the Maersk problem with the NotPetya ransomware that went in, NotPetya did not hit the Maersk critical information. In other words, all the ships and the buses and the trucks that were moving and that sort of thing. No, what they hit was the Maersk front office, where all of the accounting was being done, all of the payroll was being done, all of the tracking of the shipments was being done. Not the ships themselves, but the things that made the ships worthwhile, that made it a business. So they are redefining infrastructures these days because we are so interconnected. It's important for us to realize that, those guys that went and shot up the station up in Washington, or the ones in, I think it was North or South Carolina, I don't remember which. I think it was South Carolina. That by having stuff sit there, it is capable of being compromised, or in this case, damaged. And those great big transformers that you see in the middle of your little electrical substation, I don't know if you've read that article fully, but those transformers are usually built on request. There is not a transformer company that sits around with stock on hand to supply these things when somebody has an issue. And they were saying that, like, some of these things, if this particular transformer were to go down, it would be 2 years before they could get a replacement. So there is a lot to think about in reference to our infrastructures. What if some other Yahoo goes and starts shooting up substations? How do you help, number one, protect against it, number two, defend when it does occur, or number three, respond if it does occur, and put it back the way it's supposed to be? And they're trying to wrestle with that because they pointed out, like I said, the President's Commission pointed this out in the late 1990s. Our critical infrastructures are largely vulnerable. 25 years ago, they said this. They put it in a report to President Clinton and said, we really should look into this. And again, if you're a utility company, let's say you're an electrical company, how do you provide protection for the, 30, 40, 50 substations that you're responsible for? 100 substations, each of which has things like these transformers that is going to take 2 years to replace. But the same thing can be said for other critical infrastructures. This one just made the news. But what about the banking system? What happens if Visa gets hacked? Could happen. What happens if Visa ends up getting the other thing about it, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Integrity means Visa says you owe this much money, but I can't depend on that because Visa is developing inaccurate accounting systems because somebody went and polluted the accounting systems. Your infrastructures make things run. And without them, things don't run. So how do you help make sure that you help to keep things running? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
more.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
North Carolina, it said. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
I was just saying, well, it came to mind the example of, I don't have an answer to your question, but I just thought of the example that happened on Tuesday. We were talking about a possible Visa hack. The Wall Street, all the stocks were all of a sudden halted. You couldn't trade on majority of the stocks, and the reasoning was that they said it was a manual malfunction, but I just I wasn't exactly 100% buying that. I had a suspicion that it might have been a cyber attack, but I didn't actually look into the details of what happened in regards to this manual malfunction. But
do me a favor if you would, please, and drop that on the Facebook page. I'd like to read about that.
Yeah, sure.
And again, the important thing for us to remember when we're looking at these things is that the headlines rarely tell the whole story. It's important for you to read these articles, and if you still have questions, read another article. I don't know if you guys have ever done this. If you go to news.google.com, and I'm just using that as an example. So I pull up, Google, and it's got top stories in health and, entertainment and sports and, who's married who and all this sort of stuff. But you go up to the top and you type cybersecurity. And then you will see some of the headlines, and you can delve into them. And sometimes, I love that one. Microsoft urges customers to secure their on-premises Exchange servers. Anyway, that's where I look for things to talk about. I just go to Google News and see what is rolling around this week in the cybersecurity news. And this is one of the first places that I go. So, Chris, you point out that like dark reading and
Bleeping Computer.
Right, Bleeping Computer, those are other great places because they focus on that. But if you can't focus on it, go up here. Instead of reading about football scores, maybe you could take a look at it and say, this could be interesting. Child's Garden of Cybersecurity. It's just a cute way of saying that they are now trying to target younger, even preteens, to be interested in the cybersecurity career field. They're writing articles, they're doing games, they're gamifying some learning experiences. How do you handle phishing for a kid in preteen? It's an interesting idea, but how do you get people started? You don't start with the headlines, because the headlines are doom and gloom.
I admit some of the cybersecurity trainings that I've seen recently have become more fun, and I kind of feel like they were targeted to a younger audience than.
Hey, Scotty, going back to your Power Grid article.
Yes.
When I do my studies with Security Plus and the Certified Cybersecurity ISC Squared stuff, I had a horrible thought in my mind going, why am I learning physical security? I'm not going to be a physical security guard.
Right.
That article now tells me why you should learn that, because when you get into the risk management area, those are the questions they're going to ask, like what do you put in place to protect these substations, and that's the good explanation why you need to learn physical security as well.
Sure. We sometimes get caught up in the technical side of cybersecurity, but if the concern is what happens if someone gets to this keyboard, then your question is, how do we prevent these hands from getting to this keyboard? And that's physical security. So yeah, it bears examining locks on doors, chain link fences. Those all play a part in your overall posture.
The defense in depth strategy, where you're
exactly.
Yep.
Yep. If any of you have not studied it, it's worthwhile to go look up defense in depth. And it's basically that you have, whatever you're trying to protect or whatever you consider valuable, and then how do you stop, certain things from happening. And it's layered security. No one tool, no one approach, no one person can do everything. So you have shift change routines. You have rekeying of your locks, you have changing of your combinations, you have rotating I'm sorry, not rotating, but changing password length and complexity. You have, I don't have one with me, but you have multi-level security, multi-layer security. You put them all together and they comprise your total defense strategy for your infrastructure or service or whatever. And you can't forget them all. You can't just focus on one. They all work together. Very good. Defense in depth.
And of course, once they get to the keyboard, how do you prevent them from gaining access to whatever that keyboard's giving access to? That's why we have multi-factor.
Right. The funniest thing that I heard in reference to this, if you think about it, sometimes your defenses don't have to be that complex. I was dabbling at one point with the Dvorak keyboard layout. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the Dvorak keyboard layout, but I was actually starting to learn it, and the people who practice Dvorak point out that having a Dvorak keyboard on your computer is a perfect deterrent because people are going to look down at it and go, huh? That's not QWERTY? You're right, it's not. And they said, you know, a Dvorak keyboard and having your keyboard set up for the Dvorak layout is a perfect deterrent if you have a computer in your office that you don't want people to touch. So just sometimes it's simple things that make a difference. Oh, I showed you guys this about my when I do my fingerprint. Remember me showing you that? For my phone, I've got a little fingerprint login here. And if I, most people would do their index finger, but I don't. I use a different finger. Somebody decides that they're going to, knock me out and put my finger against the phone. My phone's going to say, no, ain't going to happen. Enter your PIN or whatever. You can be innovative. Just be careful that you are taking into account everything when you do try and innovate. Okay, we're on our last 15 minutes, so did you see that thing about cookies? That logon banner. I thought that was very interesting. It basically said, if you do something in the United States, or your data goes through the United States, or you have servers in the United States, the U.S. government can take control of it. At some point, the federal government of the United States of America may get into your bank, or may get into your car loan, or may get into your correspondence with your grandma.
Interesting.
I thought that was really curious to see that. I'd never really thought about it before, but how do we protect ourselves? Well, part of it is to understand the threat landscape. And to know that, you've got to be out looking at the threat landscape. Just something to think about. This sounds almost like we're becoming Soviet, communist in our approach. But the reasoning behind it is that we don't want to get our tails singed by some kid in Germany playing around with new scripts he just downloaded off the dark web. Oops, the guy downs Ace Hardware, So this was, to me, it was a real eye-opener, because I had not thought about the fact that the United States does monitor data as it moves around. They have to. for security reasons. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of times they talk about spread spectrum or spectrum hopping communications like radios. Great technology for the U.S. military, but it's also available out in the public sector, and there are radio sets that you can buy, even a handheld walkie-talkie, that people can't listen in on, not even smart people or federal government agencies. So guess what the bad guys tend to use? Unlike you see in those Hollywood movies, because they're all using Baofungs. I don't know if I have Baofeng radios, so I look at what they're doing and I go, yeah, I recognize that. You know, they just play around with it because it's a $25 radio and it can look like a radio. But when you get up to people that are doing, you know, high value issues, they could very well go out and buy those $200 radios and talk and be totally insulated from anybody being able to listen into them. Does happen. So, yeah, data protection is a very current discussion. You know, log-on warning banners. I think we all agree we don't read them, but we really should, because they say things like privacy is not guaranteed here. Those tracking cookies, where you get that tracking cookie warning, read it next time. They say we're doing this for your ease of use and access. But you know what? We're tracking you. And we do that on purpose. So where you say, find my local Home Depot, your browser knows where you're at geographically. That's where your tracking cookies turn on. You know? Well, what if somebody says, hey, I don't like this person. Where is he located? If they get a hold of your browser session, they know where you're located, unless you take precautions like using a VPN. Just something to think about. Yes, Prima.
Some of those cookie banners lately, I've noticed you can actually click into them, and you do have the option to only give them what they consider essential versus all.
By default, it says accept all. Or okay, you know, by clicking on this, you accept all cookies, and then you can manage what data is being sent in the tracking cookies. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Those are the main things I wanted to get through today. I did want to point out that, you know, I spoke about the Microsoft Safety Scanner. Oh, and I'm going to share my screen because I want to show this off to you. Microsoft Safety Scanner is something that you can get, you know, for free, but, oh, I got to share my other screen. You can get for free, but you can also, and I'm going to bring this down. There we go. So let's say you are, you don't want to do the Microsoft Safety Scanner. There is a Windows Defender. So you go to Windows Security. It may say Windows Defender. Go to Virus and Threat Protection, and then it says Quick Scan. Yeah, but I don't want to do a quick scan. Go to Scan Options, and then down here is something called Microsoft Defender Offline Scan. And this says that it will take your computer offline. It's going to reboot and do this local scan, and then come back up and tell you how it has been done. That is the equivalent, like I said before, that's the equivalent of having one of these little write-enabled, write-protected disks. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this so you guys can see it. You know, where you have the, in this case, it's an SD card with the little switch on the side that says write protect or lock, I think it says. Same thing. The Microsoft Windows Defender offline scan is the equivalent of having one of these and write protected off to the side and do it for Microsoft Safety Scanner. So that's another alternative. Why do you do it? if I'm going to be doing support for somebody, I want to make sure that they don't have something that is going to cause their system to run weird anyway, like a virus. So I typically make sure when I touch a system for the first time, I run a scanner on it so that I can say, okay, a virus is not my concern right now in helping this person. Okay? Anybody else have anything? Anybody else? Okay, one last thing that I would like to share with you, just so you can take a look at it. If you go to avcomparatives.org, av-comparatives.org, and then look up comparison, these are real live tests that they've conducted on antivirus software and where they believe these stack up against each other. If you don't want to read through it all, just hover your mouse over that particular company, and you'll notice they have stars. Avast, 3 stars. Go over to Kaspersky, 3 stars. Malwarebytes, 0 stars. McAfee, 3 stars. Microsoft, 3 stars. So you can sort of look at the various defense packages. Trend Micro, 1 star. So something to look at. I think that the most important thing for us to remember is that any protection is better than none at all. And too much protection can be a problem. I've been on people's offices, on people's computers where they have 3 different virus protections going, and they interfere with each other. Hey, that's a virus. Hey, that's a virus. They're pointing out each other. So just be aware. Adequate protection versus massive protection or no protection. Anything else, guys? I think I'm all done. Cool. Thank you. I sure enjoyed it this morning. Again, if you have questions or comments or articles that you've read that you think are interesting, go ahead and put them up on Facebook. Be aware that we should always be focusing on lessons learned. What actually occurred, not just the headlines, and what are the lessons we can learn from this? How can we get smarter by reading this article and discussing what's gone on in this particular situation? It's all valuable. Just don't get stuck on the headlines. Everything's going to, no. Let's work to fix that. Everything may suck, but how do we make it suck less? Okay? All right, guys. Thanks for everything. I had a wonderful time, and enjoy your Saturdays.
Thanks. Great
okay.
Thank you, Scotty.
Take care.